Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah, as you formerly know her, film critic at In Session Film, Geek Vibes Nation, and Keith Loves Movies. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing the cinematographer of a film that I recently watched, Dance First, directed by James Marsh. This film was based on the life of one of my favorite playwrights, Samuel Beckett, whom, if you're a literary nerd like me, you know the theater of the absurd and the influence that he had on us as people just growing up loving theater, loving movies, loving art, loving writing in general. But what was his life like? This is what we discovered through the film, which was divided into segments, told mainly from the point of view of the women he has come through. And I was contacted by Antonio, amazing Antonio Paladino, the cinematographer, and I love talking to him about it. Can't wait to discuss his career in general, but also how it was like shooting that film. So, Antonio, I'm just so happy to talk to you today.
Well, thanks for having me. Well, basically, I contacted you because I said thank you for this nice, critic you wrote, and then this came across, which is I'm really enjoying.
Me too. I love that you enjoyed the critic because the cinematography work on this film was just so impressive and wonderful. But however, let's start from the beginning. What made you want to become a cinematographer? When was how did you envision your childhood? Was it influenced by cinema, by art? When was the first time you held a camera in your hands?
Well, there was, I mean, I wish I could say I shot my first Super 8 film at the age of 8, which is not true. And my parents were Italian immigrants. I was born in Germany. Um, with a very simple, upbringing. My parents were, my dad was a carpenter, my mom was a cleaning lady. So, we were brought up quite humbly. I never expected anything like this to happen, really. Until after high school, I traveled the States, and um, and on that trip, I realized, how much fun it is to travel and to have a camera with you and capture images and meeting people. And then I met a cameraman on that trip who told me everything about his work, and then that was it. I mean, that for me was such an eye opener. So I left Germany after high school thinking I would become a dentist. And then after traveling, going back to university to study dentistry. But then I realized maybe it's not a good idea to look into people's mouths the rest of my life. So I'm really glad I made that trip throughout the States and Central America, with a backpack. And I can only encourage every high school student, every graduate to first of all, grab a backpack, and just see the world. And on the trip, you get a good idea what you really want to do with your life, hopefully.
Totally. I mean, I can relate because Egyptian parents, Italian parents, they want you to become these prestigious, like for me, they wanted me to become a pharmacist. And I thought to myself, no, I'm not going to stand in the pharmacy and sell people drugs all the time. And I became a poet, a writer, a film critic. So I
Nice.
can totally relate to this idea. I think
Yeah.
it's ingrained in us, but we have to defy and we have to go
Mhm.
out and be open to the world. So I totally love the story that you told me. Okay. So Antonio, the first film that you shot, or was it a music video? I don't know your first experience professionally as a DP or cinematographer.
Well, I mean, I studied in film school, and that's again, to all the film students out there, or to all the, young people out there, it is a pretty good way to start the whole industry, the whole business really. So I went to film school basically, and in the first year you do everything, a quarter of a year it's script writing, another quarter is directing, another quarter is camera, and then another quarter is something like an animation, like a classic animation class, like where you move objects and take an image, and then like a
Wow.
stop motion thing. And yeah, so basically, I guess, in those 4 years, we shot loads of stuff. We always had a camera in our hands, always, did short films, little animation films, and then at the end you graduate with like a longer film, like a 50 or 60 or 90-minute film that you graduate with.
So, okay, so you started in film school. Why did you decide that cinematography was your passion? You tried script writing, directing, probably acting too. Like, okay, you study all these sciences, and then you realize, but my passion lies here. I don't know why your passion lied there.
Well, basically, I think I did go to film school knowing I want to learn cinematography, you know, and
Oh,
yet, and that was inspired by the trip, I made prior. Um, so, on the trip, I realized, yeah, this is what I want to do, so and at the end of the trip, I happened to be in Los Angeles, so I walked into UCLA as naive as I was and said, hi, I'm here. I want to study there. And when they told me that it's like $25,000 for the first semester, just tuition, just to be in that school, I realized I had to come back to Europe and start some sort of like school there. And then after a couple of apprenticeships at some small TV stations, they were so small and so low budget that they couldn't really afford real cameramen. So on that apprenticeship, like within 2 months, they gave me my own camera and I went out and did like those 3 minutes uh, reportages slash documentaries about regional things that happen in that, in our state, which is like films like 3 minutes film on the heaviest football team in southern Germany, or like husky race in the Swabian Alps and stuff like this. So it was a really good way to like, you know, take a camera and tell a story in a compressed amount of time. And with all the work I have done there, I was basically accepted to film school.
oh. So when I watch a film and you have this shot, this close up or this long shot, or the camera goes rolling and rolling, I want to ask you as a professional, because for me, this is what moves me. It's the cinematic moment. Why do you think that there's power? There's such power to a close up where you have the actor's face right into the camera, or it's like a shot of the actor walking out, or the scene unfolding and the camera is rolling and you just want it to stop because it's so painful. I want to ask you, what do you think is the power of the cinematic shot from your cinematographer point of view, especially the close up? Because I really like a close up done right in movies where you feel like the face of the actor is powerful enough to convey emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, close-ups. I mean, there's this really big discussions I have with like colleagues and directors and friends, and of how close a close-up should be. And I'm not particularly a fan of like extreme close-ups, because I always like to see a face in the context of his environment. Um, but then other people, my friend worked on Batman as a second cameraman, and and I'm very proud of Danny, my good old friend, and he said for Greg Fraser was really important, really, really close. And I respect that, and I see, what they want to achieve with that. But me as a viewer in a cinema, when I sit there and I see like an 18 meters by 7 meter wide face like right in front of me, sometimes I feel this is like too much.
Yeah.
And but basically, you know, I think I think not necessarily what the camera does will evoke emotions. I think basically what happens in front of the camera is the most important thing. And I see this more and more with films that are so bold by just putting a camera there on a tripod, a wider shot, and cinematically nothing much is happening. But what happens in front of the camera, the scene that was written and the scene that was then performed by the actors and actresses, which unfolds a certain energy or magic or emotions. This is really what counts. And I've seen films where a person has to approach another person, for a certain subject, and those two people meet. But then instead of like seeing that scene in like close up, shot in reverse, it was shot from the inside of a car looking out, and they were very far away, these two people. But you know exactly the message she has to bring to this person. You know what this person had to deliver. So it was enough it was so powerful. So even like a wide shot where people can be so small in it can be powerful if the context that was like, the way it was written, allows for certain emotions to, come out.
So do you always have in mind the shot, or is it like a discussion director and cinematographer? Because as you said, a love scene, two people coming together and something happening, and you could have them so far away, or you could have them close, or you could just take on parts of them. You could just eliminate the environment or kind of focus on them with the environment around. How does the discussion go between you and the director to create the scene aesthetically?
Well, basically, on Dance First in particular,
Hmm.
I had these rare moments with the director first, before the production started on Zoom calls like this, and then when production started in pre-production in Budapest, we found those rare moments over the weekends to come together and sit together and then basically go through the script. And James said he would like to tell me in each and every scene, what's important for him, what he wants to bring out, and then it comes also down to very practical things, how to capture, you know, a certain scene with the amount of time that you have, and obviously if you have like on those big movies, if you have like 7 days for a certain scene, or if you have only like 5 hours for a certain scene, that also determines the way you have to, unfortunately, this also determines sometimes how you have to shoot a scene. So for us, it was always like a very you know practical thing. Also to see like how can we capture the essence of that scene with the limited amounts and means we have to have the maximum effect. And those meetings with him were, I think, like the most valuable moments in that production, just to hear him, you know, you know, all his thoughts and he's a very intelligent man, so everything happens in his head, and when it comes out, it was just for me to, to sort of, listen to what he needs and bring this to life. So it was a really good collaboration. So I really respected everything he said, and then all the ideas that I had or whatever I brought on the table, he was happy to accept. So it was a really rewarding collaboration, I would say.
So there were scenes in Dance First of just people talking, very stationary scenes. And then you have beautiful scenes of actors dancing. And you shot the dancing scenes so beautifully, especially all those amazing 1920s dances. So
Mm.
for you, how do you approach a scene where people are just stationary and maybe you probably have just to shift the point of view, and then you have a very, very alive, vibrant scene of someone dancing in front of the camera? Like, how do you approach this and how do you approach that?
Well, I mean, basically, most of the work I do naturally is a lot of handheld. I really like to get the camera. I struggle sometimes when other people operate the camera and have the cameras in their hands, and sometimes I feel so detached, and so I really like to have the camera, on me, and James Marsh said, for this film he sees more like more like tableaus, more like, tableaus where scenes are happening, and I'm happy with that. I'm very happy to like create tableaus, and light them beautifully in a very natural way, and then have certain scenes, happen in that frame. I really enjoy that, and then some scenes, of course, they just demand for more lively approach. So so that dancing was the only scene I was allowed to take the camera with physically in my hand, and and dance around the people. Now, I love working with dancers. I've done a lot of that in music videos and stuff, and and it's just so nice, if the camera is part of a dance. I really enjoy when even sometimes the dancer, reacts to the camera and the camera reacts to the dancers. It's really, it's really fun. And I mean, and that location was a killer location. This
Perfect.
and it was so beautiful. Sometimes you just come to a location like this and it's so beautiful that you look at it and you think there's nothing I have to do. maybe the wall lights are a bit bright and they illuminate the walls too much. So I darken the back of the bulbs a bit so the walls are a bit darker. But that's it, and so so yeah, this also, quite nice to just work with available light and not have, 50 electricians light everything, and then you're very restricted, of how you can shoot because you see a stand or a light there. No, we were completely free with like a
Really?
360. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I want to know, the cinematographer develops a relationship with the actors. Like, did you have these conversations with Gabriel Byrne, for example, or is it just when there is a scene that is active that you need to interact with the people in front of
Mhm.
the camera? Or is it more limited? Like, is it more the director who is mainly conversing? Because I want to know, how do you make the actor familiar with the camera or just take off that wall between them?
Mhm. Yeah, and then first, I was very humble because, because it was my first big film, and everybody around me were such professionals. I mean, our makeup, our wardrobe person, she was 65, has done big films, and James Marsh has done several films. He won an Oscar. Gabriel Byrne from the camera, Aidan Gillen, all these people. So I felt very small, in this big pond. And so I remember the very first scene we did with Gabriel Byrne, and I know from what James Marsh told me, he had a lot of respect, playing Samuel Beckett on one hand, and then his alter ego that was played by himself also, and they meet like in one shot and talk to each other. So he was very aware of that task, and he said, well, at least he said that was one of his most difficult roles he's ever played. Um, so I remember the very first scene we shot, and I was so nervous, like, we're all there, and it was the first day and the first shot really, and um, and then and then Gabriel Byrne, comes up to me and he says, Antonio, what do you think? Was it believable? And I thought, oh my God, he comes and asks me, like, in what do,
Lovely.
so and to be 100% honest, I think I haven't told this anyone really yet, but I was so focused on it was a moving shot and stuff. So I was so focused on everything else that you know, well, I paid attention to his acting, but it wasn't the only thing I was focusing on. So, but I said no, it was great, and it was good, But
Very
um,
good.
but I was quite intrigued to see how humble, these big actors and actresses are really. You know, they're just absolutely normal people. They have the same anxieties, the same fears, the same worries, and since they're in front of the camera, they're there with their faces in front of the camera, captured for eternity, maybe even, So and young Samuel Beckett, who was played by Fionn O'Shea, and so the first scene we had it with him, after the scene was done, I felt he was like lingering around camera. He's a very humble. He came across quite shy, um, and he was like lingering around camera. And then he came and he started talking to us. And so he did the next day. So he was always very interested around the camera. He asked me questions about the camera. And I said, well, I have all the stills from everything we shot yesterday on my mobile phone, because at the end of every evening, I go back to my room and then I get all the images we've shot from the DIT and I grade them a bit, and then I create these images, that I stick onto our visual storyboard that we did in pre-production. Um, so so I showed him all these images, and he was so fascinated to see him as young Beckett in a proper film still that he was oh my God, and
Wow.
that motivated him. Well, I did ask James Marsh beforehand, if I'm allowed to do that, and he said, whatever motivates the actors or actresses, go for it. So that was our thing basically. After each scene we did, he came over and he said, have you got something? He said, yeah, sure. And I showed him stuff, and yeah, so it was quite nice and I didn't think beforehand that would happen. I didn't think that there would be that connection that I would get with these actors or actresses. Um, but also Gabriel Byrne had this cough, and I had this cough because I had COVID months and months and months before, and this cough wouldn't go away. So I had these like really nice lozenges, and I gave to Gabriel a couple, and then he always came over and asked for him to get some more lozenges. So I had productions to buy like a double pack for me and for him, and I supplied him with with the lozenges. But it was lovely. It was and I saw them all at the premiere in San Sebastian. It was really lovely to see them all again.
Wonderful. Wow.
Mm.
So how did you agree on the look, the black and white look? I want to know what was the decision and how do you shoot a film like that? How do you achieve this look?
Well, basically, on our very, very first conversation I had with James Marsh, he he said, he's thinking about black and white. And I was like, yes, let's do it. I was like on board within seconds. It was absolute no-brainer for me. I absolutely loved the idea, and then he said maybe for the very, very last scene, he might want to, the very last act, basically, when Samuel Beckett is very old and he's in Paris and everything is difficult and grim and the relationship is falling apart and everything, so he wanted to have like a more like a rough, real look, like Paris in the 80s, and so I totally embraced that idea, but he wasn't quite sure if he wants to, you know, go through with this idea. So he said, is it possible for you to do both, to shoot it and then shoot it in a way that I can decide at the editing? And I said, then no problem at all, because we shot, with a color sensor, a digital camera with a color sensor anyway. And I think I would always do that. I would always shoot my next black and white film with a color sensor camera because because I think it gives you more freedom in post production. Like you can pick certain colors like the brown draw in your background, and then change the brightness of that way more easily as if you have had shot in black and white already. You know, so so we did a lot of tests. Not a lot. I'm saying a lot, but we didn't do a lot of tests. We did like a day of testing basically with the costumes and some actresses and some actors, and there I had a very interesting revelation actually, which was lighting for black and white is way easier than lighting for color. You know,
Oh,
because I would never put a lamp like in a room and shine into your face if I shot on color. I would always try to have the window and get light sources out of the window, have like a more natural look, because that would look more natural. In black and white, you can totally get away with that. In black and white, you can put a lamp right next to you and slam into your face, directly or soften it a bit, whatever. And in black and white, it'll look good. So I've realized, in that on that prep day, I've realized, it's easier. I think
that
black and
took
white is
away the
actually,
tension. Like that made the tension less of shooting your first feature. Or was it still there?
yeah. I mean, to be really honest, usually I'm quite anxious, with big projects, and I've always been because I take it seriously,
Exactly.
and I think as an immigrant child, who had to perform in the hosting country, like as a child, I had to, like, for my parents it was important. I have to behave in Germany. I have to, like, be good and achieve things. So it was a lot of pressure in my childhood, not to fuck up, and I think that anxiety, I still probably still carry in my work life, not wanting to fuck up, basically. So usually I'm with bigger projects, I'm quite anxious, and for some reason I cannot tell. I only had, like, 3 days of anxiety in pre-production, when the lens choice I thought I had um, was not happening. For whatever reason, the lenses I wanted to use were no good for this project. And all of a sudden, like 2 weeks before production, I had like no lenses. I had no idea which lenses I would go with. And that was like 3 days of, you know, um, but then after that was solved, you know, I don't know why, it was really, I woke up in the morning, when I usually would have certain anxieties, but I would wake up in the morning, looking forward to that day because I knew we shoot in the opera today, or we shoot in this amazing basement today, or we shoot in this killer library today. Like all those locations we had were such fun to shoot that I think there was no reason to be anxious about really.
Like,
Mm.
wow, this is amazing. I totally feel like achievers, like people who have big dreams, usually are anxious because they care so much about their work. So I can totally relate to the anxiety part. What I want to know is which is the most difficult scene that you shot here in Dance First, but also throughout your life, like throughout your career, pre Dance First, something that really challenged
Mm.
you.
Mm. I mean, mm, two things were tricky. The first thing was that other world, that place
Mhm.
that Samuel Beckett describes as the other world, like this vast landscape where people meet. And so when James Marsh found that location, he showed me images, and it was this bizarre quarry that was the people, I think before the Second World War, they cut these huge cubes of stone out, and so whatever was left was this surreal landscape that you've seen in the film. And it had this huge opening. It was a bit underground, so they had this huge opening in the ceiling. And so when we went there, it was a killer location. Everybody said, "Oh, a great location," and it is a great location. But obviously, I see those locations with the eye of a cinematographer. Like, how does this location look like at 7 o'clock in the morning? How does it look like at midday? How does it look like in the afternoon? And if I have to achieve like a long scene, what will the light do and how can I control the light? So obviously controlling the light for that location was quite tricky. And as very often, I'd rather work with taking light away rather than adding light. This is, I think, a more natural way, also like a more production friendly and cheaper way, I guess. So for me, it was like, how can I control the light by putting things over this huge hole, and with the little amount of budget we had, really we needed like bigger cranes with like big frames that can hover over the thing, preferably even be able to move a little bit. So so production said, no, 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 this is expensive. We cannot afford this. And I said, I have like a small light downstairs that you know, I'm not spending any money on lights. So the money has to go towards this. And I told them how important that would be for the scene, and they went for that, which I'm very glad. And then the same thing for a scene we shot at night. So how do you light for night? And that's I think is like the emperor assignment in filmmaking is how do you make the exterior nights look like. And and like big American films in the past, they had like these huge cranes with huge lights and and over the decades, people went for that sort of look, like this American look, how films look at night. But it's so unnatural. Every time I saw a scene like this, and I would watch a film with my wife, I would ask her, you know, look at it, how do you feel that night looks like? And then when she paid attention to that, she said, "Oh my God, yeah, what is like this big reflection on the ground, like wet streets, and then this big lamps." And you realize, they always use, I think they always used way too much lights, so the nights didn't really look natural to me. So that's always tricky for me. Like, how do you shoot a night scene that is obviously not too dark and not too overlit? So there's like this fine balance. And then again, you need like cranes and soft light boxes that are, quite expensive, But I think those night scenes and then the other world, controlling the light in the other world, was tricky. And when you ask me about other difficult scenes, I guess quite similar, for a commercial I shot once. It was like a 90-second commercial. So 90 seconds, you tell a story that takes place over half an hour of a day at sunset, you know. So you
Oh,
shoot 4 days. So you shoot 4 days. Um, and in the film, it looks like it's maybe like 30 minutes just before the sun sets. And and funnily, another director who had the same project on his table, he said, I'm not doing it. This is too, I cannot get my head around it. It's too complicated. So he passed. And Sarah Dunlop, a dear friend and an amazing director I work with a lot, um, we did it together, and that was quite something because the practical side of it, you have 4 days. You start at 8 o'clock in the morning. The sun is out, and at 12 o'clock, the sun is up there in Budapest again, and it's 40 degrees, and the sun is blasting. But what you want to achieve is like dusk, you know. So this is always quite tricky to then have like a light continuity um, that's believable. And so I guess these kind of shoots are quite tricky, or sometimes, if you have to use a cable cam and you attach a wire to like this building and another wire to another building, and then you have like two cranes, and then those four cables are attached to like one camera, and the camera can move freely and stuff. So those couple of times I used that is always a bit tricky to set up and plan, and then basically you only achieve like one shot. Um, um, yeah, because it's so complicated. But yeah, I mean, every single, basically every single project, there's new assignments, new tricky things, and even if you think, oh, this is an easy shoot, and then you get there, and then and it's always challenges, and I guess that what makes this job so interesting, because it really never really gets boring.
wow, exactly. I can tell from your conversation. Okay, so as a film nerd, I was watching some of the trailers for your short films. There's this The Appointment directed by Alexander Singh. And I always wonder when you have someone kind of like lying on their side and the camera is in their face, how do you achieve a look like that? Like as a cinematographer, for me as a film nerd, I would imagine the ways a camera would move and you would put it like, is it that way next to the actor's head or is it that way? How do you achieve a look like that? It's so close.
Are you talking about the camera shot that goes right into his
Yes.
eye?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, so basically, there's a lens system, and I think I think we use the Fraser lens, and that's basically it's a basically a lens that is that long. It's like a snorkel. It's like a long thing. It's like this long tube with several lenses inside. I've never opened one, so I don't really know what it looks like exactly inside. But there are certain prisms and lenses and lots of them, and there's like one knob, and when you turn that knob, the image rotates even.
Wow.
So you can have this that I can point that snorkel towards you, and I can apply this thing, and the image rotates this way. And then um, the other thing what those lenses do, you can come very, very, very close. You can always almost focus to the front lens. You can always focus to the dust on the front lens. So basically, we achieved that shot like that. The tricky thing is that those lenses need a lot of light. So if I used a lens now on you, the image would be too dark. I would just see a little bit of your skin, and that's it. So you have to like blast a lot of light into that. And since the other scenes were quite dark, now you lose you use a lot of light, but still the mood will stay. Well, the assignment here is that the mood will still be the same, but the level that you work with in terms of f-stop is much higher. So we blasted a lot of lights, and then I created that mood. And when you look through, it's the same dark mood, and then the lens can go towards the actor, and we're rotating the image, and then it's just a matter for the focus puller to get that focus right, and and that's like another tricky thing they have to deal with. But yeah, that's how we achieved that shot.
Okay, so what is new for Antonio? What are you working on next, or you haven't decided yet?
Yeah, I mean, I know, I mean, after shooting Dance First, I really liked the whole experience of shooting a feature film, and 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 I'm really keen to shoot my next visual feature film. I haven't found it yet. I read a couple of things that we're not there yet. And rather than burning myself out on films, I don't really like to shoot. I'd rather continue, music videos and commercials. I mean, I love shooting commercials. They take me all around the world, and and so I'm busy on a couple of commercials. I just came back from shooting three in a row. Now I have a little break in Berlin, and then yeah, and then I carry on shooting some commercials and reading more scripts, and hopefully very soon I'll be doing my next one. Yeah.
Hopefully very soon. Thank you, Antonio. This was an amazing conversation. I feel very
Mm.
inspired and actually very educated. So thank you so much for being so generous with your words and your time.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.